Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Dan the Tutor. In today's video we're going to be covering the equation of a circle in geometry. I also laid out the 4 problems we're going to be looking at today, so if any of those interest you, you can jump ahead to the video and watch that problem. But first, before we do any of these, I just want to quick go over what the equation of a circle is. And that follows the basic formula x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So in other words, the way you would use this equation is you would say the center is at h comma k, and you'll notice the minus signs, which means whatever you see there, it's going to be the opposite. Like for instance, if I have x minus 2 squared, then I know h is positive 2, so it's always the opposite of what you see. And then the radius here, that's what r is. The radius is going to be just r, which means because you have r squared in the equation, you will have to take the square root. Like for instance, if I have equals 64 here, you'd have to take the square root of that, and so the radius would just be 8 then. So with that, let's go ahead and start looking at some example problems. The first one I have here is a simple one. It's x squared plus y squared equals 9. And what I would like to do is I would like to draw this circle. Basically, if you want to draw the circle, you need 2 things. You need to know where the center is, and you need to know what the radius is. And then you're good to go. So the center, since there's no h, there's no k, it's just x squared and y squared. There's nothing in parentheses. That's the easiest case in the world because the center is just at 0, 0. That's what you need to know for that. Now for the radius, it's just going to be the square root of 9 because that's what the rule is. Just take the square root. And so the square root of 9 is 3, so the radius r is 3. Now that we know where the center and the radius is, we can now graph this circle. So if I just make my own coordinate axes, and I know what a radius is, it's going to be 3 tick marks in every direction, and that's where the circle points are going to be. So for instance, there's a point here, a point here, a point here, and a point here. And since it's centered at 0, I just need to make a circle going around these 4 points right here. Now I'm not the best at drawing circles, but you get the point. This is good enough for now. So that's going to be the easiest example we ever see for circles. X squared plus y squared equals 9. And that's all it is for the first one. Now for the second one, we're going to make it a little bit harder, but still not too bad. Let's say we have x plus 3 quantity squared plus y minus 1 quantity squared equals 8. Same idea. I got to find the center first and the radius. To find the center, I'm just going to do the opposite of what I see in the parentheses. For instance, I see x plus 3. That means my h is actually negative 3. And when I see y minus 1, k is actually positive 1, which means my center is at negative 3, comma 1. And then for the radius, this one's actually kind of hard because what is the square root of 8? Well, basically, you can either leave it like root 8, you can reduce it because this is like square root of 4 times square root of 2, and we know the square root of 4 is 2. So in other words, square root of 8 equals 2 root 2, or if you prefer to write it as a decimal, that's going to be 2.8 after you plug it in your calculator. And now we can graph this circle. And this one's going to be harder for a couple reasons. Number 1, the center is not in the middle, and 2, it's a weird radius, but we're going to do the best we can for this. So here's what I'm going to do. First of all, since the center is at negative 3, 1, I'm going to draw my axes a little bit different than normal. First, let's find negative 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, up 1, there. There's my center right there. And if the radius is 2.8, then I need to go 2.8 tick marks, or about 3 tick marks, in every direction. So for instance, I'll draw my points in blue here. To the right, 2.8 is 1, 2, almost back to the origin. Now I need to go up 2.8, so I'm going to add 3 more tick marks there. So up 2.8 is 1, 2, almost 3, like right about there. Okay, now I need to go left 2.8. Let me add a few more tick marks. So 1, 2, almost 3. And then the last one going down 3, or about 2.8. 1, 2, almost 3 gets me to right about there. And then if I connect the lines this time, then this is going to be my circle. And basically, it's supposed to be a perfect circle, just centered around the point -3, 1, with a radius of 2.8. So there we go, there's our next circle. Now for the rest of these, I don't have to draw it because you get the idea now. But what I will say is that we are going to be finding the center and the radius. That's going to be the point of the next two. Because the next two are the most challenging of all. You'll see why. It involves something called completing the square. So if you do not know how to complete the square method of factoring, I'd encourage you to watch my video because I literally have a video about completing the square. I'll try and put a link for it in the description so you can watch it and you can understand what completing the square is because you need that to solve this problem. So this assumes you watched that video and you know how to complete the square. And now looking at this does not look at all like the equation of a circle. And that's because, let me help you out here, I'm going to group the terms together. In other words, x squared plus 2x plus y squared minus 8y. And I'm going to put the 12 on the other side, like negative 12. I don't want the plus 12 on this side. I always want it on the other side. Now this is not the equation of a circle, or else this would literally be impossible because you can't have a negative radius. The other problem is that I have x squared and 2x, and remember I need to get it in this form, so we're not even in the form we want it yet. So this is fine for now. But what I'm going to say is we need to complete the square in order to get the right factors. So let's go ahead and complete the square. If you remember, you have to find b over 2 squared. In other words, in this case with the x's, b is equal to positive 2. And we need to find b over 2, which would be 2 over 2, which is 1. And then we need to do b over 2 squared, which is just 1 still, because 1 squared is 1. And basically what that b over 2 squared means, I'm going to add it to both sides. I'm going to add that to both sides. Before I do that, I also want to do the same thing for the y. So for the y, I see that b is equal to negative 8. So that means b over 2 is negative 8 over 2, or negative 4. And then b over 2 squared would be negative 4 squared. Remember that any negative number squared is positive, so that's going to be positive 16. And we're going to add that to both sides as well. And so now let's look at where I'm at. For the x's, I have x squared plus 2x plus 1. And then for the y's, I have y squared minus 8y plus 16. And then on the other side of the equation, I had negative 12, but then I have to add 1 and add 16 to both sides. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor this. Like for instance, x squared plus 2x plus 1 is just going to be x plus 1 squared. And the shortcut for that, by the way, is that it's always going to be in the form x plus b over 2 squared if you're completing the square correctly. And if you remember, b over 2 is 1, so I know it's x plus 1 squared. For that reason, I also know it's going to be y plus b over 2. Now if I scroll up, we said b over 2 for y is negative 4. So it's going to be y minus 4 squared. That's the correct factors on that side. And then on the right side of the equation, negative 12 plus 1 plus 16. That's just going to be 5. And so now I have everything I need because this is just like number 2. Basically, the center is going to be at the point negative 1, comma 4, because again, it's always the opposite of what you'd expect. And then for the radius, that's going to be the square root of 5, which, sure, we don't know what it is exactly. If you use a calculator, you'll get about 2.2. And if you want to graph that on a chart, you can. You're more than welcome to. It doesn't matter. But we found the radius, we found the center, and that's really what I wanted to do for this problem. And now for the last problem of today. This is by far the hardest one, and it is a really challenging completing the square problem. So I'm going to try and explain every step, but if you don't understand it, it's probably because you need more help with completing the square. So here's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to group the x's together and group the y's together. So in other words, I've got here 4x squared minus 16x plus 4y squared minus 24y equals negative 51. Now before I go about completing the square, I need to factor out the 4 because I can only use completing the square if there's nothing in front of the x squared or the y squared. So luckily both of these things are divisible by 4, which means I can factor out a 4, and it's going to be x squared minus 4x now. And then for the y's, it's going to be 4 times y squared minus 6y, because you divide, again, each of these by 4. And then on the right side you have negative 51. So now we're getting close. For the first one with the x's, I would say b equals negative 4, which means b over 2 is negative 4 divided by 2, so negative 2. And b over 2 squared is going to be negative 2 squared, so positive 4. And that's what I'm going to be adding to both sides. Then for the y's, it's going to be b equals negative 6. B over 2 would therefore be negative 3. And then b over 2 squared, that's going to be positive 9. And that's what I add to both sides. But you do have to be careful when you're adding that to both sides. And let me show you why. So first, we have 4 times the quantity, x squared minus 4x plus 4. And then plus 4 times y squared minus 6y plus 9. Now before I actually add plus 4 and plus 9 to the other side, I have to realize something, that I'm not adding 4 and 9 to the other side, because that 4 is going to be distributed to the 4, actually making it plus 16 technically to this side. Same idea for this one, 4 times 9 is plus 36 when you distribute. So I'm actually adding plus 16 and plus 36 to the right side. We didn't have to do that in the last problem because we didn't factor anything out. But when you factor something out, you need to distribute before you add it to the other side. That is going to impact your answer. The good news is from here, everything's basically the same. So it's going to be 4 times the quantity, x plus b over 2. Remember, b over 2 here was negative 2. We said that earlier. So minus 2 squared. And then plus 4 times, it's going to be y minus 3 squared. And that's because b over 2 is negative 6 over 2, so negative 3. And then on the right side, negative 51 plus 16 plus 36. You can use a calculator if you'd like. You just get 1. Now here's something we did not do for the last problem. Now we have to deal with these 4's. In order to deal with the 4's, you just need to divide both sides, well, really everything, by 4. And so now you have x minus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 1/4. And that, you need to do that in order to continue solving. So we know what the center is. The center is going to be the easy part. It's positive 2 and positive 3 because of the opposite rule with the h and the k. Now we need to find, for the radius, we need to find the square root of 1/4. Now a lot of people have trouble with this. I'm going to tell you the secret. The secret is realizing that the square root of 1/4 is the same thing as the square root of 1 divided by the square root of 4. And because of that, we know the square root of 1, it's 1. And we know the square root of 4, it's 2. So the radius r is 1/2. And the center is at 2, 3. So there we go. There's some really good examples on how to solve the equations for circles, how to graph them, and even how to complete the square in order to find the radius and center of a circle. So if you do have any questions, please post them in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye.